I think you guys had a transaction with like 5,000 outputs or something, and
15K is now
15K. Holy fuck! So there's a lot of really cool stuff that you guys are doing at Ergo, and I want it.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Ergo Pulse. I am Dan, usually from Japan, but today from not Japan, coming to you sort of live, not really, pre-recorded. And with me, I have none other than Charles Hoskinson.
Hey, you pronounced my name right.
Who you all know and love, I hope, after 6 years now how to pronounce your name right.
Well, you never know.
Well, you never know, exactly. And of course, we got the one, the only Kusti, which I still don't know where you got that from, but you're going to have to tell me that a little at another time. Alex, of course, of Ergo, another man you all know and love. And coming remotely from
Colorado, no longer warm and sunny. Charles, not in. It's been snowy here ever since you left. Charles, you got to get back here. Get the weather better.
Well, it's always warm and always sunny in Colorado, but only sometimes Colorado.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really great because the community has really been looking forward to having Charles on. As we all know, that the Ergo and Cardano community are very symbiotic in a way. We got a lot of people in both communities. We have EUTXO. We share their accounting model. We share a lot of the same principles, the same fundamentals. So it's really great to be able to put these two minds together, and me, but mostly these two minds together, and be able to ask some questions that we got from the community. And so without further ado, let's get into it. All right. So we have the first question coming at you. And the question is, at what point does counter-economic approaches outweigh the compliance with legacy governance model, the governance system? And this is for Charles.
That's a hell of a question right off the bat. So repeat it one more time.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I got it right.
Okay. Yeah, we make them tough, Charles.
Yeah, the Ergo community is great.
So at what point does counter-economic approaches outweigh the compliance with legacy governance systems?
So I guess the thing they're getting at in the question is that you can use economic-driven governance as opposed to legacy governance, so democratic processes in order to make decisions. So, for example, there's no democratic process behind proof of work. It's just a meritocratic system. Because the competitive equilibria are set correctly, you go from one miner to many miners, and you end up creating a secure system. So you see this a lot in the Ethereum community, where they mention things like shelling points or other game theoretic terms. And the basic concept is that if you parameterize your system correctly, your system will converge to a desirable outcome. There's actually a formal field of game theory for this called mechanism design. So normally game theory, you say, here's a game, and you try to predict what the outcomes are going to be. Mechanism design is you start with the outcome you want, and you try to construct a game that will produce that particular outcome. So you're going in the reverse direction. So you look at certain things that are desirable in network, making decentralization increase over time, being able to converge to a decision that's necessary, like avoiding a fork or some sort of community split, getting contributions for open source development, these types of things. And then you say, okay, what system can I construct that will enable that? With Cardano, we spent over 2 years designing a white paper for the stake pool design out of Oxford, where we tried to parameterize. So we have things like K and A naught and these other things. But basically, we say, okay, if we set a factor, we'd like to have K stake pools, a convergence to that. If we set a minimum fee, we'd like to have a convergence to a certain property, given that, for a certain network structure or quality of service and so forth. And for the most part, it's worked okay, but it's an under-researched area, and it's one that I think ultimately is very powerful, because if you get the game theory right, you don't need consent, you don't need force, you don't need laws and regulation. It's a natural tendency of the system to move in that particular direction. And you can look at other parts of the systems, like, for example, UTXO growth, or of other things. A lot of systems preserve that stuff forever. I think Ergo, you guys have the meltdown, UTXO meltdown.
Yeah, storage rent.
Yeah.
It's called.
And that's an example of a game theoretic property of, how much do you charge, and what will that ultimately do for the system?
Yeah, it's a system with changeable parameters.
Yeah.
So then, miners can change the storage and economy on the fly.
Yeah. So you want to add anything to that?
In general, talking about counter-economic tools. So, in the first place, the whole cryptocurrency space is about building such tools, right, with the help of tools from cryptography, game theory, so-called crypto economic security, which is often just about doing some punishments and rewards, well designed in hand-wavy way, and so on. Some protocols are successful, some not, and this is a field which is evolving fast. And in regards with regulations and regulated economies, so I think systems will coexist for some time at least, and it's hard to predict possible outcome, especially as the landscape is already very diverse now, right? Regulatory landscape and so on. But I think we will see a rise in such tools because, a lot of communities around the globe are going to use economic tools.
Yeah. So, Joe, do you have anything? Do you have anything to add? Because actually, Joe is very well versed in a lot of these things. And actually, that was one of the big surprises working with Joe is how well versed he is in these systems. So, Joe, do you have anything to add?
I guess when you get like peer-to-peer, that's the first sentence of the Bitcoin paper, right? Peer-to-peer cash, peer-to-peer economy. I don't know. I think these tools are ultimately designed for people, like open source tools for people of the internet. And then it's a matter of saying, okay, if it's not designed for those that kind of attempt to control people, it gives people the opportunity at least to not be controlled in their environment. And given the economic reality of the globe right now, that has a lot of value. There's a lot of inflation and, economies that really are not stable. I think that's probably a part of why our industry is where it is at the moment. Just that, legacy systems, I don't know. I guess there's a loss of trust globally. Just depends system to system, but, the world's kind of in a rough patch at the moment, COVID and inflation. So I think that counter-economic tools certainly can protect people if they're used right.
Well, actually, this brings us to our next question, which is, there's a lot of mixed feelings right now about how the war is how banking regulations and especially the usage of the SWIFT system, or say the weaponization of the SWIFT system, has what kind of impact it has on just on the general state of things. And the question here is in light of the weaponization of the SWIFT system, how best to ensure censorship resistance and how to deal with the possibility of fragmented internet?
What can we do now is to test how cryptocurrency protocols are running, where some limitations already. So in a place like China, for example, right? We need to improve peer-to-peer layer and also, improve light clients, right? Because with limited internet or shutdown, we still need to provide possibility to use clients where bandwidth is limited, maybe limited to just modem calls, right? A piece of paper to be sent our ordinary mail. And with things like Nepopos, this is actually quite possible even. This very amazing result when you can help to store value, right, in zones where there is no internet. Or it's very limited. In regards with weaponization of money, the whole spirit of cryptocurrency movement, I guess, is about to be protected from control your money, right? So about moving power to protocols and individuals using them, right? And about also understanding trust assumptions precisely, which is not the case with fiat money. When things are set in stone, like protocol rules, right? So it's about known assumptions, unlike what you have with fiat, right? Where everything can be changed at any moment. Basically.
Yeah, and I mean, especially the whole thing with weaponizing SWIFT. So from one side, of course, you have people who are saying, well, we have to do something about the situation, and there's bad actors in the system, and there's bad money moving through the system, and this money specifically is directly sponsoring some of these activities, these nefarious activities that we or most people are against. But then on the other hand, what you got to think about is, okay, so if they weaponize SWIFT for this group of people, right? So if the government can say that this group of people cannot have these services and this international system has been essentially weaponized, what can they then, how far will they take it? I mean, that's really always the question, is how far will it be taken? And that's why distributed governance is so important. And that is why what we do is so important, is because in a way, yes, the community, okay, the distributed consensus can decide what this particular policy is, but it's not decided in a centralized manner like it has been done with SWIFT. So yeah, it's a very important, it's a very nuanced system, I think.
And so the problem with society is that we build institutions to deal with complexity. That's a good thing. Institutions help you do that. The bad thing is that we inherit the institutions of the past, and we don't consent or fully understand how those institutions work. So you're born into a presupposition of a constitution, of a health department, of a voting system, of a banking system, these types of things. And what ends up happening is that an event occurs, like a war or a bad election or a revolution or a plague or whatever it is, and then those institutions do things, both positive and negative. And then you disagree with the negative stuff, and then you start saying, well, they shouldn't have that power. All the while, you didn't realize that they've always had it. You were born into that. You didn't consent to it, but they just happen to have it. So the global banking system is a great example of this. Many of these things were established as a result of the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. I wasn't born in 1944. Dan, were you? Alex, were you? Yeah. So we didn't agree to any of this. We didn't consent. Joe, I don't know how old you are, but I don't think you were born in the 40s.
No,
yeah, exactly. So we kind of just inherited this stuff. So now we see the global banking system being used in this particular way for a particular event. And whether you agree with that or not, it's too tempting in the long term to abuse that power for the few to be able to gain an advantage over the many. And so the more centralized you are and the less consent and transparency institutions have, the more dangerous institutions become, especially with global governance. So the point of blockchain technology is to say, well, what institutions can be reconstructed where you can effectively deal with the complexity that they were intended to manage, but you don't have to admit centralized actors who are corruptible and have the ability to co-opt an institution for their own purposes. Voting is a great example of it because it's so easy to understand. In a conventional legacy voting system, you cannot check your vote. You just have to accept that it was recorded properly. In a conventional legacy voting system, you can't verify that your vote was recorded properly. In a conventional legacy voting system, you can't verify the integrity of the voting system as a whole. So I live in the state of Colorado. I also live in Wyoming. I can't go and check the Republican primary in Wyoming and also see how many people were registered to vote and verify that that the people who voted didn't exceed that. I can't verify that my vote was actually recorded properly. I can't do any of these things. So that's an example of a complete trust-based institution. I didn't build that institution. I didn't vote for that institution. I inherited that institution. Alternatively, when you look at a blockchain system, you can verify the integrity of the entire system if you have a copy of the blockchain. You can verify your vote was counted. You can verify your vote was counted correctly. So it has a complete opposite property, and if it's built the right way, it could potentially replace and revolutionize the infrastructure. And if I got a choice between the two, I think most people would choose the one they can verify or the one they can't verify. And by extension, you could look at this for financial institutions, banking institutions, supply chain systems, and actually government decisions in general. So the more SWIFT does this, the more the world order does this, the more likely it's going to be that there's going to be a revolution of the people where they demand that the institutions be replaced, which is why the technology we build is so important, because it's an option. There are other options, but it's an option to replace these things. And the better job we do, the more compelling of an option it happens to be.
Yeah, and that's actually that what you just said about inheriting these systems is also, it's a very nuanced thing that you just said, because people who grew up in a fairly free society, like say the United States or in the West, basically, where you have a relative wide range of freedom of speech, you don't get arrested for speaking against the government, things like that, right? You are under the you kind of become accustomed to having these freedoms, and then you kind of neglect these inherited systems and the understanding that some of these things are just perceived freedoms.
Yes.
And that's actually, Alex and I grew up in the Soviet Union, and that effect carried on to the Soviet Union, because in reality, the average Soviet citizen was not happy with the system. I mean, they did not like it, but you just were in a place where you were kind of grandfathered into it, right? Because we didn't fight the revolution. Our parents didn't fight the revolution. Our grandparents didn't fight the revolution, right? So that was grandfathered in. All this bureaucracy, all of this crazy stuff has been grandfathered in, and you just come to accept it, and you come to kind of like drag on with it. And that's what it did. It dragged on with it. And it started off as something good because the country was in a bad situation. This was kind of a solution for that particular situation, for the poverty that was going on after World War I. And then it just dragged on, and the communism dragged on, and more was added, and more freedoms were taken away. And people just accepted it because it presented some security, some stability. And I think in the West, that is also something that we come to accept, and that realize that stability that we get from the freedoms that we have is actually impeded by these grandfathered systems that we just kind of come to accept, and we shouldn't. So,
Joe, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a great answer.
Yeah, we're good. But actually, we have we actually have another question that's along these lines, and I think it's actually a lot more that has to do with more of a distributed consensus of giving the people the power to kind of enable these systems to work for them, the distributed systems to work for them. The question here is, and this is for Charles, they'd like to hear about the plans of Cardano to enable a regulatory framework and how to avoid enabling the future weaponization of trade and finance.
Yeah, this is, Alex has to run into the same problem as me. When you build a cryptocurrency, there's like this endless debate you have internally of how expressive and capable do you make your base system, and then how much do you enable through extension. So your base system is something every single person has to live and deal with. Extensions are the things that the people who use the extensions live and deal with, but it's not compulsory. Meaning if Dan, if you don't like that extension, you don't have to deal with it. It's not your thing. But if it's at the base level of the system, you have to accept it. So for example, your monetary policy, that's a global concern. Everybody has to deal with how many tokens are in circulation. But if I build a layer 2 identity system and I put that in as like DIDs and it's in the metadata of transactions, you don't have to use that. And the people who do use that can use it for regulatory compliance. The people who do use that can use it for credentialing or these things, but that's an optional thing. And if you don't care about it, it's not your problem. So it's really a struggle of how much is enough. And the game here is the minimum viable enough, the minimum viable expressiveness. Everything we do in Cardano, and I think Ergo follows a similar design philosophy, we tried to innovate and give capabilities and let the user decide, but we didn't go crazy with it. Extended UTXO is a great example of that, and Plutus is a great example of this. So with Ethereum, they said, give them everything. They're like, let's replicate the Java virtual machine. Let's make it as expressive as possible. And then they spent years dialing it back a little bit. Maybe we need to do this. Like every fork that comes out, they're always retuning the model. With Cardano, we said, we were even more conservative than Ergo. We said, all right, here's the extended UTXO and Plutus, but we didn't have reference scripts or reference inputs or data. We're very minimalist model for development. And then our developers come and they say, you really need to add maybe a little bit more to make this a little bit more expressive. So we're adding instead of trying to take away. Well, that's important because the more that you add, the more dangerous you make the system. There's many more ways it can be exploited. It can be misused. There's many more attack vectors that exist. Now, when you look at things like regulation and governance, what regulation is effectively doing is saying you need oversight. If it's done incorrectly, it's saying give a third party, a central actor or a federation of actors, special privileges to do certain things. Freeze your accounts, reverse transactions, a litany of these things. Those will always, in the long term, be abused in some context. Always. There are no exceptions if you give enough time, enough people, because humans are humans. So it's a super bad idea to put those capabilities in your system at the ledger level. Now, people consent and they want to deal with regulated business and build regulated businesses. You should build capabilities where, as an extension, people can do that, understanding that there are inherent risks within the system. And then, for the most part, that works out pretty well for 90% or more of the outcomes that you want. Where regulation needs to be at the base level of the system is for consumer protection in a very specific way, information asymmetries. It should never be the case where one special actor knows something the network does not know. Okay, so for example, we know this with insider trading. Let's say, Dan, you decide to be a biotech engineer and you run a pharmaceutical company and you find out that the FDA is just about to approve your drug. That knowledge is very valuable. The minute that the FDA approves a drug, if you look at stock trading, it goes up a 5x or 10x, okay? Because you're now a real company, you can sell it. Well, what if you call your friend and say, hey, Soli, on Tuesday, the FDA is going to announce, so on Monday, you should buy my stock so you can go make a lot of money. You have an information asymmetry. You know something the market doesn't know. If you and your friend take advantage of it, that's going to make you a lot of money. Conversely, what if, a scandal's coming? The CEO of the company's just been arrested for embezzlement or something like that, and it's not announced yet. Well, you could go call your friend and say, Soli, short sell the company because on Monday they're going to announce this. And boom, there you go. Like imagine if the SEC lawsuit against Ripple, you knew that before the market did. You could short sell XRP and have made a lot of money off of that process. So architecturally speaking, when you design these protocols and you think about regulation, I think the bare minimum thing you can do for global compliance is to ensure that there do not exist information asymmetries. So every actor who uses a system, whether it's a core developer or it's a regulated actor, unregulated actor, grandma in the park, they have equal access to the same information in the system as everyone else. As for the other things about disclosures and AML KYC and reversals, build protocols and smart contracts and extensions that individuals or collectives can use to extend the protocol to have those capabilities, but don't force them upon everybody. Or else you have to pick a winner, whether it be the US regulatory system or the EU or whatever. And it's always, if you pick a winner, everyone loses. But anyway, Alex, you build cryptocurrencies too. So what's your philosophy about it?
So pretty much the same, cryptocurrency is about many protocols coexisting. So we have a networking protocol where transactions flow, then blockchain, which is basically recording snapshots, right, of transactions in the peer-to-peer network, conforming to some rules. And then you have applications on top of the blockchain, right? With current level of programmability, so you can build a lot of applications. And the Ergo approach was about to have some minimal set of tools on layer one to allow for maximum number of applications to be built on top. So, in regards with the question, the most notable example is Ergo Mixer, I guess. So Ergo is not privacy coin, right? But there is support for Sigma protocols in the core. And then you can build different privacy applications like tumblers, right? Like Ergo Mixer. So it's not in the core, right? But it's non-interactive, non-custodial mixer, which can give you a level of privacy if a ring is big enough, comparable to first iterations of Monero, maybe. So yeah, it's much better than Bitcoin, but it's not in the core, right? So when some law against privacy coins will come, so Ergo will not be tagged as a privacy coin, hopefully, right? Because, otherwise you need to tag Bitcoin as well. Because theoretically you can build non-custodial and non-interactive mixer for Bitcoin even. So there is a sneaker proposal for Bitcoin, but it's so hard to implement that the community failed to build it to the moment. This makes things very complicated, right? So if there is a law against privacy coins, but you can use functionality of a privacy coin on application level, how to resolve this situation, and so on. So things are definitely going to be more complex. Another example, so in coming days, EU will consider a law which is about requiring KYC, AML, even for non-custodial wallets, right? Which doesn't make any sense to me. And so if Ergo Mixer can be considered as a wallet, right? Because it's a desktop application you can use as a wallet, then maybe someone will be responsible, but it's hard to say, right? Because it's the final implementation was done by anonymous developers, so who they will look for some anonymous developers over the internet.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have luck.
A lot of these laws are actually, or proposed laws, are made by people who obviously don't understand the core concepts of how these systems are built. That is why you have photos of people capturing a cryptocurrency wallet. You have people standing around. It's like, we got this. We got these people. Do you know how the cryptocurrency wallet works? It's not actually there.
It's like that meme of the guy on the beach who's got like the mop and he's trying to mop the ocean. He's trying to push the water back from. Like, good luck with that. I don't know, Joe. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it's all about transparent assumptions of either control or risk, which risk is incredibly hard because depending on where you are and what the current, regulatory mood of the day is, it may be this, it may be that. But I think ideally, if it's, you're plugging things in where users voluntarily interact with these type of tools, and they have some sense of the assumptions that they're making, both in terms of who's in control of that particular part of the system or what the risk may be, then leave it to the user. It's my opinion.
Absolutely. All right. And so the next question from the community is, so this community member is very excited about the Let's potential on Ergo. They say that I strongly value having a resistance to government outreach and the potential society-controlled grids that CBDCs could lead to. Are there any interoperable uses between Ergo and ADA that could help lead to a more decentralized and less centrally controlled future? And so I would suppose this is a question for Charles as well as Alex.
Right. Maybe Joe also.
Well, let's start with Alex. What is your take on this?
All right. So in regards with CBDCs and crypto and applications on top, like in the first place, they will coexist for decades, maybe, if we consider a global level, right? Because there are some places over the globe, not far from this place, there is former country called Yemen, right, with no any central government at the moment, and they will. I'm not sure they have a central bank or any alternative at the moment, and they will have CBDC. Not soon, right? Definitely, and there are many places over the globe. With no central banks, right? Central banks been burned, like in Lebanon 2 years ago. CBDCs will be started in first countries which are well regulated, right? From what I read about CBDCs from monetary folks, even so, they don't quite understand, right? Why are they needed? So actually, there can be a lot of interesting properties, right? CBDCs are providing, especially to governments, you can have precise statistics, right? You can have precise emission of money. You can inject money not in a helicopter way, but in some smarter ways. But it seems that there is no any work in this direction, even, just very fuzzy thoughts, at least in the public space. And so, it seems, then we will have mostly negative, right, effects of CBDCs in real life, like privacy of money usage reduced a lot, right? Anyway, even in well-regulated countries, CBDCs will coexist with old fiat money, right, with cryptocurrencies for decades. Then it's hard to say how this competition will be about, because, in free competition, right, good money drives out bad, but it's not the case, right, with CBDCs, because they will be enforced in some way. Let's see, but I think for next 20 years, different forms of money will coexist. So we have enough time to react to negative consequences, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, what did you take, Charles?
So I guess there's two questions here. One is a specific question about interoperability between Ergo and Cardano. And what's nice is, especially after the Vossel hard fork in June, Cardano is going to be in a really nice position to talk to many different systems, whether it be our own side chains or external currencies. So one of the things we helped set up was the UTXO Alliance, because we said, well, we all kind of look at the world in a similar way from an accounting perspective and have similar concepts about how scripting ought to be done. So let's try to promote interoperability between our systems, or basic principles between our systems, whether that be standardization, certification of the scripts, to ways for the systems to talk to each other. Now, Cardano supports a native asset standard, and you can issue any asset. There's already 4 million that have been issued on Cardano, and most are NFTs. But now we're starting to see tokens like Sunday Token and Meld and these other things, and they're launched and they exist. One can issue a stablecoin or issue even a CBDC on Cardano as a native asset, and then it would be very trivial to write a protocol to wrap that asset and move it to Ergo, or issue an asset in Ergo and move it back and forth. I think this is likely going to be done with Sigma USD and Jet, because these are very similar protocols to each other, and there's going to be some flow of value between the two systems and trading on DEXs. So that will organically emerge through community efforts over the next 12, 24 months, and the more of that, the better. That's the point of the system, is a multi-chain world, and we think interoperability matters. Now, the more abstract question is, and this is what Alex was talking about, is what makes a good currency, and what are our CBDCs actually doing? And if you read the white papers, there's a lovely one from the Federal Reserve, there's some from the Bank of England. They're all over the place. There's many papers that have been issued. IMF has issued a paper. EBA has issued a paper that do discuss CBDCs, and some of it has to do with macro and microprudential policy. Some of it has to do with consumer protection. Some of it has to do with velocity of money. Where CBDCs get interesting is first when you're moving from a unitary monetary system where your means of exchange, store value, unit of account are all connected together to splitting them apart. For example, El Salvador is effectively doing this. They have Bitcoin as a store of value, so people can put their value there, but then they use the US dollar for the actual transactions, for their means of exchange and their unit of account. Things are still priced in dollars. Well, if you look at the design of JED under the hood, you can take a store of value like Ergo or ADA or Bitcoin, and you can use it to construct a stable coin. So technically, in a place like El Salvador, they could use Ergo, or they could use Cardano or another well-built system, and they could basically take their Bitcoin reserves and use it to de-dollarize the country, but still be pegged to the value of the dollar. That's technically a CBDC play. You have a store of value in these other two properties, and you have a bi-monetary system. Well, what's really also interesting is the composability of capabilities that you just don't have in a legacy financial system. So let's say that because you're now using digital money, you can distinguish between a tourist and a citizen, that all tourist transactions pay a tax. And that tax is paid into a sovereign wealth fund. And the fund will then invest money, and every quarter do universal basic income, pay a dividend to everybody inside the country. So you have countries like Georgia, 10 million tourists relative to 3 million people. Greece is even more, the ratio is even more pervasive. So tourism is great for their economy. Well, what if every time a tourist comes, that tourist is actually contributing to a universal basic income of the entire society? This is super hard to do in a cash-based legacy monetary system. With a CBDC-based system, it's actually quite trivial to do this because everybody has an account. It's easy to airdrop value to people on a regular basis. Paying dividends is quite straightforward. Distinguishing a resident from a non-resident is also straightforward to do if you're clever about how the system can be constructed. So you can experiment both in the construction of money in going from a mono money system to a buy or try system or even more. And you also can experiment in the use of money in transactions. And you can do many things there. Now, where CBDCs get dangerous is that a totalitarian government has the ability to co-opt the system at any time and push a button and shut you off from the system. So if they don't like Dan, they say, we just don't like Dan. They just push a button and boom, Dan's broke now. You can go from a billionaire to broke. We actually see this right now in the legacy system with the Russian oligarchs. they're having a hell of a time. They're going around seizing their jets and taking their yachts and shutting their accounts down. And these guys are just desperately running around trying to figure out where they can put their money because they've become pariahs. Used to be pretty popular people, but not anymore. So imagine that, but for everyone, anytime, and very easy for a government to do that. And imagine if that's combined, like what China is trying to do with the digital yuan and social credit, where they say, okay, you have an algorithmically defined number that's usually defined through some AI process. That's an aggregation of all the data the government collects on you. And you have a score. And if your score is high, you're a good citizen. If your score is low, you're a bad citizen. If you combine that with a CBDC, if your score falls too low, suddenly all your money gets shut off. That's horrible, right? But that's actually where China's going. And by 2030, that's a reality that every person in China is going to have to live. And could you imagine that occurring here? You say, oh, that could never happen in America. Well, what we tend to do is we tend to just privatize it. So, for example, the United States says, well, there's freedom of speech. But then the most speech is on private platforms. And then Facebook is allowed to deplatform you. Twitter's allowed to deplatform you. And so they even deplatform the president of the United States. So if they can do that, we don't really have freedom of speech if 99% of your speech is there. So analogously, if all your money is private money that's controlled by stable coins who have central issuers, wouldn't it be possible if your credit score falls too low that you lose access to your private money? We see this soft bigotry in certain industries like the marijuana industry, the pornography industry, the arms industry, and now increasing the crypto industry, where if you're a cryptocurrency company in the United States, it's getting harder and harder to have a bank account. And so even though you're completely legitimate, you're lawful, the US government says you're operating legally, the soft bigotry of the system basically prevents you from getting an account. So effectively, you've been shut off from having your money. So that's a huge concern. So while CBDCs are really interesting from a global perspective, and they allow economies of scale that have never been seen before and a real big amount of monetary innovation, they have a tremendous dark side to them, which is why I think it's very important that if you're going to do CBDCs, you do them as protocols like open permissionless ledgers, open cryptocurrencies like Ergo or Cardano, because those systems have principles about them. They can't be co-opted. You can't be shut out. Alex can't take your Ergo away. I can't take your ADA away. These systems, regardless of their founder's intent, are just going to do what they do, and they don't care about the real world. And so there's some safety in that if the government goes a little cray-cray.
Yeah, it's again, it's all about the nuance of the use case, because there's actually quite a bit of I guess argument in the community right now about, are CBDCs good or evil? Because some look at them as being this great thing. Finally we get mass adoption. We get governments looking at this. We get digital assets. We basically get rid of our dirty fiat. And on the other hand, we have these conditions where you would be, again, it could potentially be weaponized against you. And I guess it's as Charles said, it has to be done in an environment that is still distributed enough, a distributed system like Cardano, like Ergo, where it just simply it's not possible, or it's extremely difficult for a government to come in and just say, you're good, you're bad, you're good, you're bad. And again, it goes back to what we were discussing earlier with, okay, so some people might be okay with SWIFT being weaponized and used against adversarial actors and bad actors. We agree, if somebody is really bad, take away their money, take away their fortunes and whatever. And then most people don't have a moral argument against it, or at least put it away. But really, if you think about it, you really have to start to realize, how far will it be taken? How far, if you give that control to one centralized party, how far will they take it after they get rid of these quote unquote bad actors?
And the other thing that's dystopian is that in China's case, they don't even know why people are bad actors. The social credit scoring is mostly algorithmic. So you have some number, and kind of the inputs that would maybe make that number higher and lower, but the actual score, even the bureaucrats don't know. It's done by neural networks and these other things. So you just get a number and you're like, well, you're 17. I don't know why you're 17, but you're 17. Yeah. It's like, well, is that good, bad? It's like, well, yeah. And so that's really terrible. Is that this bureaucracy of evil? There's a book. I think it's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And if I got the title right, but it's a big, voluminous book. It's like 1,000 pages or something like that. And what the author was trying to understand is, how do you go beyond the stereotypical evil SS Nazi, which we can all look at and easily say is a bad actor, and look at the fact that the entire nation of Germany was somehow co-opted into building a bureaucracy that ultimately can conduct evil. It's very similar to the Soviet Union in that respect. And while the individual Germans and the individual Russians in their respective systems were not evil people, they were contributing in their own way to evil. So the guy at the camp is really bad. But what about the train driver? What about the person who built the train cars? What about the person who laid the train tracks? What about the person who provided the fuel for the train? At what point do you have some absolution and so forth? And the problem is that when you look at these big data, AI-driven systems that govern and regulate society, what's happening is that we're taking that concept of the institutionalization and the bureaucracy of evil, and we're taking it on steroids. We're saying we're just going to build a whole system where even human beings aren't involved anymore. Algorithms are just basically making these particular decisions, and it's a very deeply concerning thing if you really follow it through and see how far it could go.
Blame the algorithm.
Yeah,
you can't blame the person. Blame the algorithm. What's your take on this, Joe?
I think some balance can be found by looking also at like how you can build up local community tools. Local exchange trading systems, community currencies. I think that kind of the bottom up approach needs to happen concurrently, and to some degree they need to compete. If you have a local community currency that delivers value to where you are, that's a valuable tool, especially in areas that don't have, let's say, a lot of liquidity or, credit available to, actors. There are ways we can build these systems to incentivize kind of the bottom up approach, as well as, the top down as, the CBDC type system is certainly possible. But I think we have to look at both ends of the spectrum to try to really find where things fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's shift gears a little bit more towards the Ergo community. So we have a lot of questions from the community specific to Charles's take on what's going on in Ergo, because a lot of people are, really excited to hear what Charles thinks, how Charles views Ergo. There's even there have been rumors of Charles roaming Sigma Valley, the Ergo metaverse. There have been rumors. These rumors have been unconfirmed just yet. I don't know if Charles wants to share anything on that. It's okay if you want to kind of keep it ambiguous.
I am not Tupac. So I've always said Ergo is a spiritual successor in many ways to Bitcoin. If you look at the principles of Bitcoin, the kinds of things that Satoshi was trying to accomplish, as defined by the white paper and the comments in Bitcoin Talk, when I look at the things Alex has done and his team have done and the Ergo community has done, they're logically consistent with what Bitcoin would have been had it been invented at a later date. It has a fair distribution. It has a very nice proof of work algorithm. The original intent was non-outsourceable puzzles, and there was a lot learned in that process. But basically, one CPU, one vote. If you look at the scripting language, Satoshi did intend for Bitcoin script to be more expressive. The problem was that he didn't know how or didn't have the time to make it more expressive. And every attempt they had actually created complications and problems. So when you look at Sigma protocols and extended UTXO, these types of things, they're logically consistent with an evolution of Bitcoin's technology. So I've always loved Ergo from that perspective. The other side is that Ergo was born of an abstraction of cryptocurrency concepts. Scorex, for example, this idea of separating a cryptocurrency into logical modules and trying to understand what are they from a very reductionist viewpoint. That's always been deeply appealing to me. And we tried, for example, with the GKL paper, on our side to understand what a blockchain is and create some well-defined security properties for it. And then once you have it, you can have meaningful conversation about security, whether it be proof of work-based security or proof of stake-based security. So I always felt that Ergo should get more respect and visibility and liquidity and attention, and that the evolution of Ergo is ultimately a very good thing for the industry as a whole. You know, the other thing is great products and great founders create great communities. And what we've noticed on the Cardano side, looking into the Ergo community, has been a very friendly, just look at the first question you asked, intellectually deep community. There was no Wen Moon here. You know, this was like, hey, we're talking about real things. And that's the other reason I said Ergo is the spiritual successor about Bitcoin, because if I've been in the space for a very long time. I remember the early days of Bitcoin. The conversations we had in the early days were not about NFTs and when a token was going to go up or down. There were no tokens going up and down. I mean, we were trading Bitcoin on spreadsheets. Okay, people were using PayPal accounts to run exchanges. This was a very wild time. There were a lot more conversations about philosophy, a lot more conversations about technology and capabilities. And it's an era that's gone now in Bitcoin, but it's still present in Ergo, and I really miss it because it was fun, you know, and it was exciting, and everybody was very friendly and open. And so I truly do love that. Now, we still learn, like we learned a lot from Extended UTXO from you guys because you were a little ahead of us, especially expressiveness of language. And we're also now looking at some of the Sigma protocol ideas and seeing what can be done there. There's a lot of really cool things we're doing with Mithril that I think may be quite useful to you guys. You know, you guys, I think, did you implement NEPA into Ergo yet? Or
yeah. Now, fully implemented.
And that's something we try to get into Bitcoin for like 6 years. It didn't happen. It's not going to happen. And NEPA are great. And actually, it's so exciting to see something that's on a paper, you know, work its way into a protocol and see the consequences, positive and negative, of that, and how the ecosystem uses it. So it's just great to have ecosystems like Ergo around, and they're so wonderful. And if all cryptocurrencies were like this, I think the space would be significantly further ahead. And overall, people would be a lot happier. It wouldn't be so stressful being a cryptocurrency entrepreneur.
Yeah, you touched on kind of ecosystem evolution, right? And what could have been, what should have been, and what basically Ergo can become. And so a question that we get asked a lot in the community, and this is something the community has been discussing a lot, is, and in your opinion, when Ethereum goes proof of stake, they say this summer, maybe, does soon, exactly, very soon, when Ethereum goes proof of stake, is Ergo likely to absorb most of the hashing power? And with Cardano's focus on energy efficiency, does Charles think POW is a hindrance for adoption of Ergo?
You want to take the question about Ergo absorbing the Ethereum?
The hash power. I guess that's highly possible because, other competitors are now basically Ravencoin and Ethereum Classic. It was very prominent cryptocurrency green, but not anymore, it seems. It's kind of failed, unfortunately. Ravencoin is mostly about Bitcoin with just tokens added, non-use cryptic instructions even, I guess. Real competitor is Ethereum Classic, right? And I don't know. So hash power will be spread, I guess, around those three cryptocurrencies. And I think, there is a good chance for Ergo to get lion's share of the hash power leaving Ethereum. But I'm not sure about this summer because, I'm hearing about Ethereum going proof of stake very soon, since 2018, maybe.
It's been a while.
Or 17. I mean, so it's hard to believe.
What's so crazy about Ethereum, and we do have to get going here in a few minutes, but what's so crazy about Ethereum, the whole proof of stake journey, is it's a classic example. And we made the same mistake with Cardano, where you get too ambitious with your roadmap. You try to solve too many problems at the same time, and you get mired in the complexity of these problems. And then it turns out that to get there, you have to invest a lot more time, money, and effort than you thought you originally were going to. Even big companies make these mistakes. Microsoft with Windows Vista is the canonical example. They said, we're going to do all this revolutionary new stuff. And they thought they'd have it all done by 2004. They launched in 2006. They were $10 billion over budget. It still didn't work. And then Boeing with the 787 was another example of this, the Dreamliner, where we're going to outsource all of our stuff, and we're going to make a carbon fiber plane and all these things. And they were mired in complexity, and again, billions of dollars over budget. So Ethereum transitioning from proof of work, proof of stake, they could have done it in a very conservative way and a very gradual way, or they could do it in a very ambitious way. And the ambitious way is like all the things they've done recently, the sharding, these types of things. They're solving a lot of problems at once. And, I admire the ambition, because we had a lot of ambition in our roadmap. We did 3 big things. We did the science of proof of stake, from foundations all the way up. We did a lot of work on the accounting model, and with extended UTXO and Plutus, and domain-specific languages like Marlowe, and a whole certification ecosystem and formal methods. And then we also did governance with Catalyst and the voting system and all these other things. We wrote 131 papers. That was not easy. It was an enormous amount of work. And we had delay after delay, and we had to learn how to write code like this and build an ecosystem like this. So if I look at Ethereum where they're at now, I think they're past the high complexity component, 7 years in. And I do believe that they will have a successful transition at some point to proof of stake. Now, will they have the proof of stake they want to have? Probably not at launch. We didn't have the ecosystem we wanted to have at launch. Vossel hard fork adds in pipelining and a lot of SIPs to make Plutus more expressive. And we're probably going to need a few more hard forks to really get ourselves where we'd love to be as an ecosystem. But the difference between us and them is we broke these things down into 4-month packages of work now. And we're very realistic about the feasibility of those 4-month packages of work. Whereas Ethereum still is trying to do these gigantic monolithic things, and they're getting locked into these monolithic things. And they're not really clear. And they always look for the savior of the week. So it's Plasma in 2018. Now it's ZK Rollups is the savior of the week now. And there's always this new thing that will come and it will save everybody. And I think that's a very wrong way to run an ecosystem. Oh. The other problem is that they're starting to learn that firing people is hard. So right now they have these mercenaries, miners running their system, and they can go anywhere, but they really like that Ether money. Yeah. And getting rid of them is going to be a really hard task, because you can't go fire $300 billion worth of value, miners, these things, and expect them to just take it. So they could very well have an Ethereum Classic, or Ethereum Classic could surge, or Ergo could receive them and surge. It's an open question of where and how. It's a great opportunity for the ecosystem for people to do proof of work style protocols. But it's something they invited upon themselves because they didn't plan the transition as well as they probably could have. And it is what it is. If I was Vitalik, I wouldn't have gone to proof of stake with Ethereum. What I would have done is kept the mining paradigm, but moved into sharded proof of work. And I would have, like Prism or Pramod Viswanath's paper, or what we did with parallel chains. And there's a lot of great papers like fruit chains and other things that are around. I would have followed that research thread, and I would have really emphasized what Ergo has been doing, like NEPA-POWs, and actually explored ideas like useful proof of work, and at least made it not so energy problematic. Proof of stake is really a system that you have to bootstrap from. You start with it. You don't just go from proof of work to proof of stake. It's really hard to do that. If they pull it off, that's a great thing, and maybe it gives some hope to Bitcoin that they could do something like that. But it's a big challenge, and it's a unique challenge to their ecosystem.
Yeah. Also, well, it's hard to say any value in switching from proof of work to proof of stake, because for both there are known ways, right, to get into bottleneck at peer-to-peer layer, right? So network bandwidth being bottlenecked. Why to switch? And by the way, it seems Ethereum is already about this bottleneck at layer 0, right? So switching consensus at layer 1 will not provide any value.
Yes, everybody ignores the network stack. You can tell a real blockchain architect because they talk about the network first, not the consensus protocol.
Yeah, so they already have very aggressive proof of work, right? Blocks every 15 seconds with this ghost protocol not being implemented fully. It's a little bit messy protocol, right? And it's already been used very aggressively, right? So by switching to proof of stake, so no any value will be added because bottleneck is not there actually for the real Ethereum network we have now.
And by the way, that's one of the most under researched and implemented things. The fourth major innovation of Cardano. There's more than 3 actually. We did a lot of work on the network stack, an enormous amount of work. And we have a very unique network stack, and it has unique properties about it that other cryptocurrencies don't have. But in the modeling of that, one of the things we realized, exactly what Alex is saying, is that you oftentimes, after you get to a certain level of optimization of the consensus system, are completely network constrained.
Yeah, and actually for Ethereum, there is no progress in layer 0 since 2017 in Geth. So the only one client which is making progress these days. For Ethereum team, it would be better to improve layer 0, right? Some networking protocols. And doing maybe something like sharding or side chains on top of the existing consensus protocol. It's not quite clear why to switch to proof of stake. I mean, aside of Vitalik's desire to do that.
Especially after you've already accomplished, proof of work is a winner-take-all system, and they now have enormous hash power. So there's like no reason to transition and restart your security model. It's one thing when you're like a small proof of work coin, like we were with Ethereum Classic. We got 51% attacked several times. And so it's okay, well, this whole proof of work thing is not working out so well for us. But when you've already won, like your Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you have an enormous mining community and it's not going anywhere, security and underlying consensus is not your issue. Your issue is the use and utility of that and the network layer. That's where you need to do your optimizations, and it's absolutely a cogent point to point out that they've ignored that, which is a bizarre decision. I'm not sure why.
Well, guys, thank you very much. I mean, this has been really great. I think the community is going to be thrilled to hear all this great knowledge come from these rock stars of the blockchain ecosystem. And before we go, so I would like to ask, Charles and Alex and Joe, what synergies do you see between Cardano and Ergo? What do you think would make sense for both communities to work on together? Just a quick message to the community about that.
So real quickly, I'd like to see collaboration on the development of the science of Sigma protocols and alternatives, especially in rollups of outputs. I think you guys had a transaction with like 5,000 outputs or something, and
15K is now
15K. Holy fuck! So there's a lot of really cool stuff that you guys are doing in Ergo, and I want it. It's like I feel like There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis, and he's like, "What's this? Why don't I own this?" And so I see that, and I say that's really cool. Certification standards of smart contracts as well. So design patterns with extended UTXO, cryptographic concepts like Sigma protocols, and also optimization of output rollups. and certificate and these types of things, certification of smart contracts in general, are areas I think are very low-hanging fruit for collaboration. We're also exploring useful proof of work. We'll be publishing that paper very soon. It involves using Walksat. We'd love for the Ergo community to review that and be potentially recipient of it, like they're downstream of some research like NEPA-POWs. But that's at least what I see. I mean, what would you like to do?
So we are exploring also things like Hydra, right? And also, off-chain collaboration between Ergo and Cardano dApps. In the context of ErgoDex, so I'm in talks with ErgoDex guys. They're currently exploring possibilities to have some shared framework for running ErgoDex on layer 2 for both Ergo and Cardano. I guess layer 2 solutions would be the same or very similar. And so we're also investigating design patterns and some design choices in Bluetooth and so on. So I think a lot of things to get from Cardano. And we are studying all the papers coming, and also looking to implementations of Hydra and so on.
And Joe, what will be your take? You have your finger on the pulse of the community.
Sure. Last I heard, we're about 10 weeks out from being bridged with the Rosen framework.
Yeah. And
I'd be curious to learn more about Mamba and how that's progressing in IOG.
Mamba's doing great. That's we'll leave that one for another time. But we've made some phenomenal progress there. Also just best practices with development. I think you guys are still in Scala for Ergo.
Scala library. Yeah. So there is currently alternative implementation of Ergo 3 interpreter in Rust, and that there is now effort to implement a microclient for NEPA-POWs in Rust. But I guess in regards with full client, we are still a few years away from having a full client in Rust.
Yeah, we wrote Mamba in Scala, and we were looking at actually migrating to Scala 3, which is a really interesting language. So there's a lot of just how do you build cryptocurrency in Scala? There's I think 3 or 4 out of 8,000 that have chosen to use Scala. So there's some knowledge transfer there too.
All right. Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, this has been an epic episode of Ergo Pulse. I really appreciate the both of you joining us. The community is going to be thrilled. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
And everyone, have a pleasant morning, day, or evening, wherever you are.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, everyone.
This is Dan signing off.
Bye, everyone. My pleasure.